Andy, are you there?
Yeah.
Were you on the invite that I sent out? Kim was saying that she didn't see the URLs on there, so I resent them out this morning.
I don't have it on my calendar. Will you send it to me?
Yeah. I resent it out to everybody this morning, but I checked all of the ones for the rest of the year and they're all on there. So
I have them on mine.
You do? Yeah, that's okay.
I wonder if there's like duplicate calendar invites.
Maybe. Okay.
But the way that like the way I got to the links is when I get like the notification of, you know, there's a meeting in 15 minutes, I just opened the item and then they were all there. So if you didn't go that way.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to do, you know, that's what I was intending to do. So everybody had the link every single month, you know, that when they clicked on the meeting invite, it was all in one place. So that was what I was intending to do.
Yeah. Yeah, you just have to actually open the email, and when you accept these calendar invites, it puts the email into the trash.
Oh, geez. All right, so I'll probably have to send it out every month, separate. I'm not sure what else to do.
Hi, guys, it's Caroline. Tom says the link that was in the email that just went out won't get him into video or audio. He said he can't get in.
Andy, can you check on that link?
It said what?
It won't let Tom Fisher in.
But did it say he couldn't use video or audio, or it just was an outdated link?
He said, I can't get into video or audio.
Okay, maybe, because I remember last time for some reason, people couldn't use video. So I'm wondering if the same thing is going on, or...
Do you want me to ask him specifically what he's encountering?
It's okay. If you actually just tell him to use the public link, I can promote him to a panelist. That's probably easiest right now.
Okay, the public link was that actually in the packet? I see it on the screen.
Yeah, so
okay,
it's in the packet. It's also on the Park City Transit page.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
It's also on the calendar invite.
Oh, so just use any link. Use the link from the calendar invite. That's probably easiest. Okay. Okay, let me tell him that. Thanks.
Some people didn't receive the link, so I sent it out this morning again to make sure everybody got it, but I think it caused confusion again.
No, he said that's the link he's trying and it's not working.
I wonder if there's just something wrong with the one that's connected to his name. So everybody else is on, it looks like.
It looks like Matt is having issues as well. He just texted us, and I didn't think he was going to join, but
He's not. That was from Tim.
oh, he forwarded it from Tim. Okay. I'll tell him to try the public link.
Yeah, so if anyone's having issues with their links, I don't know what's going on with that, but if they use the public link, I have the ability to just give them mic and camera access.
Did the screen just fall out downstairs?
Tom says he can't get in even with the public link. I guess he's just going to try and call in.
So strange. Tim's having the same problem.
So I should tell him that you guys didn't do that on purpose.
It says that Tom is already in the meeting, so maybe
Yeah, I see
he
him.
got like
Yeah.
double.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me tell him that too.
Andrew, do you see Tim Henney coming in on the public? Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I should have just made him a panelist.
Okay, awesome.
There he is.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, oddly, normally when I click on my individual invite, it goes right into the page that asks me to join the meeting, which is what it did when I went into the public link. But I'm in through the public link, not my own specific individual link. I tried repeatedly and it just went to a blank page that talked about loading the app and do I have a client,
Weird.
Yeah.
Mine actually did the same thing, and I got around it. But
How did you get around it, Steve?
it said there was one of the things on that blank page that said something like, if you already have Zoom installed, you can launch it through the app. And I just clicked the hyperlink. It was like small text. It's not the normal thing. It was weird.
Huh, okay. I did see that. I was afraid to, I have a extreme
Don't be afraid.
hyper fear. Clicking links that I don't know what's gonna happen.
Well, I think we have
So
everybody.
Tom says he can't. Tom says he's in the public link but can't see or hear anything. He can't see the screen or hear us, and he needs a call-in number that he doesn't have. Can someone text that to him, please?
Yeah.
Oh, go
Caroline,
ahead, Kim.
I don't know if you heard what Steve figured out to get around that, and if we could try to talk Tom through that or not. In the meantime, Andy, could you send him a number?
Yeah, I will email him the call-in number. And then I'm trying to, he should have video and mic access. I can see his name and there's no restrictions on his thing, so.
No, what I'm saying is he can't hear us talking and he can't see your screen. So it's not just that we can't hear him, it's that it's just like dead space.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah,
For
let me
him.
send him the
Sorry.
phone call-in number.
Yeah. I saw he tried to call in again and then it gave him an X. And I guess it didn't work.
Zoom had an update recently. So, and it's not obvious. You have to go into your settings and ask for an update. So that could be part of the problem too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Tom is calling in from a 970 number. Can you please promote him to panelist?
Andy, did you see the 970 number showing up to promote him?
I don't see it yet.
I do.
Let's see.
I see him when I bring up full attendee list. There's two
Okay.
non-participants, whatever panelists, Alexis and the 970 phone number.
Okay, there we go. More, and of course, now it's not giving me the option to make him a panelist, but I can allow him to talk. I don't know what difference that makes, but
Can
Tom,
you hear
you
me?
should be able to, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Can you also do the same for Alexis, Andy?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we finally have everybody. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Seems like I'm cursed on these things lately, but we will go ahead and get started. I just want to welcome everyone to the June 16th JTAB meeting. I'm Kim Feldstead, Park City's Transit Manager. And with that, I'll go ahead and ask Cindy if she would please call the roll for the record.
Okay, for the advisory board members, we have from Summit County Council, we have Councilwoman Kim Carson, Councilman Chris Robinson.
Here. Here, yep, I don't know if we need
Park
to.
City Council, we have.
Right to merge on 515 South.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I think that was just Bernie dialing in, so continue.
We have Councilman Steve Joyce, staff members from Summit County. We have Tom Fisher, Carolyn Rodriguez, and Jamie Danzy. Park City staff, we have Sarah Pierce, Kim Philstead, Vinnie Newen, Robbie Smoot, Jerry Benson, Alexis Verson, Andy Stevenson, myself, Cindy Stockley, and did you say that Scott
Yes,
joined?
Scott Birmingham.
And Scott Birmingham.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Do we have anyone from the public? I didn't see anyone. Andy?
Yes, we do.
John Simmons? Yes.
Okay.
Looks like we do have public. John Simmons.
Great. Well, we didn't receive any written comments, so does anyone from the public, would they like to address the JTAB board today?
You can use the Q&A chat box to provide public comment.
Okay. Hearing no one, or seeing no one, I guess, Andy. We'll go ahead and move on. I have quite a few discussion items today. Let's start off first with reviewing and accepting the June 2nd meeting minutes. Andy, I don't know if you can scroll to those, and was there any changes that anyone felt was necessary, or are they acceptable?
I didn't have any questions. Thank you.
Me either. I'll go ahead and move that we accept the minutes from the June 2nd meeting.
Second.
Great.
Now you need to do a vote.
Aye.
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 Okay. I think that was none opposed, if I counted right. All right, with that then, we will go ahead and get the June 2nd meeting minutes approved and into the record. Next, we will go on to our bus stop accessibility study. And Alexis, if you want to go ahead and take it away. I believe you have a PowerPoint that accompanies that.
Yes, good morning. I have a very brief PowerPoint. I think I'd primarily like to just answer any questions potentially. Last fall and over the winter, Park City had a consultant do a bus stop inventory and accessibility study system-wide. There we go. We had a consultant catalog every single permanent bus stop in our system. So that's about 251 permanent stops. We identified all the amenities that were there or that were potentially lacking, the dimensions of the stops and shelters and sidewalks and flat work that may or may not be there. And then we added all of this information to a GIS map. We also have a very robust spreadsheet that identifies all the stops and the amenities and things like that. The deliverable was a prioritization model based on the accessibility of the stops, the amenities, and then the boardings or the usage of the stops. So we took that information and then we're able to weight and rank the bus stops and identify which ones were most in need of improvement. So this is, I don't expect you guys to really be able to see these maps very well, but they are included in the inventory and accessibility study that came with the packet. So you're welcome to dive into that a little bit. This map is an example of some of the information that we were able to garner from that study. It identifies that 140 stops, for example, don't have missing flat work, which would be like the concrete work and the sidewalk leading up to it. And then we're able to create a list as part of that study that ranks system-wide all of the different stops and their need for improvement. So we ranked them based on their accessibility, whether they're compliant with ADA standards, and sort of at what level they're compliant. If they were nearly compliant, we put them in a different category and said these only need minimal improvements to meet ADA compliance, or they function as a compliant stop, so they're ranked a little bit differently. And then we also use the boardings and the stops that had higher boardings and more usage were ranked higher in the priority list in terms of need for improvement. So I think the biggest thing I want to touch on today, and again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on the actual work that we did there, but we are now moving forward. City and county are meeting weekly on how to address and tackle these stop and shelter improvements system-wide. So we do have FTA grant funding allocated to go to these improvements, and we're now determining, based on the inventory and accessibility study, plus some of our, boots on the ground practitioner knowledge of our specific area, to determine how we want to prioritize those improvements. So I think, and Caroline and Kim, you're welcome to weigh in on this, but I think that our team determined that the most important things to improve system-wide is the accessibility and making sure that our stops are usable by all of our patrons. So I think we're prioritizing the flat work and the access to those stops and making them usable and ADA compliant. So that is going to be our first step. And then we're going to identify which of those we can do near term and apply sort of our fiscally constrained model with the FTA grant to that. And then phase 2 of that, I guess you could say, would be the shelter improvements and adding amenities and benches and identifying which stops should have shelters, which only need a bench, things like that. So some of those more nuanced improvements, but that aren't necessarily critical to having the system function and be accessible for our riders. And then we also are working through a model for sort of the project admin of this and the construction management. Again, we have 251 stops in the system. And while we don't necessarily think we're going to be doing flat work and adding stations and amenities to all of them, this is a pretty robust project. So we're just identifying what that should look like moving forward. Any questions?
Alexis, this is Steve. Do you have any sense, I know you guys haven't gone out and priced all this kind of stuff, but if you have kind of a small, medium, and large kind of idea of what these bus stops would cost, if we were to do all 250, do you have any sense? I mean, I'm just trying to get some idea of how big the total issue is.
Sure. Jamie Dancy with the county actually did some incredible legwork on costing that out. And I think, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, to do the flat work, which we decided was the most important priority system-wide, I think we're looking at about $2.5 to $3 million to bring all of our stops into compliance and make them accessible. And then, again, the shelters and things like that, I don't see that we would be doing at most of our stops, but we're pricing those out at about $30K for a very nice custom shelter.
And would that be installed and everything, or I mean,
are you asking if that price includes installation?
Yeah, the $30K is that built?
That's a good question. I think we haven't gotten that far yet. That's primarily just materials. The stations are being designed, or the shelters are being designed to be pretty modular, so we can order a bunch of parts and then scale them up or down depending on the stop footprint and use. So it's very scalable, and they essentially can sort of just be plopped down and bolted in. And so I think those installation costs are going to be pretty minimal.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Oh, Alexis, this is Caroline. If I could just add to what you said, yes. I just want to reiterate what Alexis said, in that the bulk of that 30,000 is really in the materials and building the shelter, but both Park City and Summit County, obviously our public works teams are pretty efficient. So the installation costs, they can totally do the installation if we go that route, and the labor costs are minimal once it gets to that installation. So that 30,000 should really actually cover it.
How many stops would we multiply by 30,000? Not 251, but how many are lacking in adequate shelter? The 36 by 48 feet, whatever. It wasn't 36 by 48. That'd be huge. I don't know where I got that number. I saw it in the report, but I'm dreaming.
We're not going to let you design these things, man.
Look at 36 by 48. We'll use that as a small RV shed for every. That's
There
how
you
we
go.
got to the buses.
So that's an excellent question. And I think that's something that we're going to identify in our weekly meetings, the city county team, to identify which ones we really think need shelters. Obviously, we want to replace some of those existing old prefab shelters that look kind of crappy. And so I think those are our priorities, to replace existing shelters. I don't have a number on that right now. I'm happy to get that to you and follow up. And then I think we would assess what above and beyond that needs a shelter, or what are the high use stops that don't currently have one that really do need one.
I think it's admirable that you've commissioned the study, and I think having good, accessible, safe, convenient shelters are a big part of an effective transit system. And it would be interesting if you could take this data and then kind of create a matrix or triage matrix of, to Steve's point, of how we would go about incrementally, you know, getting up to what it would cost and where we would start, which are the highest priorities. Is it flat work first and then shelters, and which ones, and kind of come up with a plan to, over time, improve the quality of the stops and bring them into more federal compliance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's our goal for this project team, is to create that matrix and that timeline, and be very clear about what we're doing and when.
Hey, this is Jamie. I just want to jump in. Alexis is right about the cost, but I know that that number always sticks with people. So Derek Radke, I have to give him the credit. He did most of the work. It's about $2.5 million in that ballpark just for the county. But if you add the county and the city together, it doubles or better.
For flat work.
Yes.
Not
yeah.
shelter,
That's right. Not for the shelter, but you're looking at $5 to $6 million just for flat work and prepping a site to make it accessible. So the slope has to be correct, the landing pad, the width, there's some specific requirements. Jump that in there. Thanks, Alexis. That was a great presentation.
Alexis or Jamie, has there been any, this sounds like a future, it's less of a question as opposed to probably a statement. So once we do projects like that and get them into compliance, will we be looking at projecting some kind of operations or maintenance costs to those, so that we don't let them deteriorate over time, or maintain those so we get the best life out of them?
So we've done that on the county side. Derek put an estimate together what it would be for another FTE for maintenance for summer washing and then winter plowing, in addition to other equipment that he would need for that. But the cost that we did for Park City did not include that to this point.
Okay. And Alexis, you mentioned also that you're still looking at the, you know, and what an overall project would be, and then the administration of that. Do we have any idea yet when type of work as a project would start? Probably expecting that it would be multi-year, but when that would start, and then is it more efficient for us to do a joint project that is managed together, or do it city-county differently?
Great question. I do think we would likely start these improvements next year. I think that makes the most sense. And I think there's probably some efficiencies in leveraging, you know, one joint project and hiring one contractor to do flat work and things like that. I don't think that we need to duplicate those efforts. We can share time and bandwidth and resources to do that. That would be my suggestion.
Hey, Alexis, this is Kim. On the page 12 of the staff report, when you talked about, it looked like listing some priorities, you had a reference to the top 5 stops with the highest amount of boardings with an overall accessibility grade of B+ or worse are. Then you list 5, and underneath you have the exact same sentence, and then a different list of 5.
Okay, so I think and maybe that's a typo in my staff report, but they're ranking them a little bit differently. So one of them is, I was just gonna share that staff report here. One of them is ADA compliance, and one of them is ADA functionality.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I was just pulling up.
Alexis, do you want to share your screen
Andy,
instead?
Yes, please. Let me just, so they're weighted a little bit differently. Where did it go? There we go. So we have ADA compliance and then ADA functionality. And here it basically says that ADA functionality means they're nearly ADA compliant and they function that way, although if you were to take pen to paper, they don't specifically meet the ADA requirements for an accessible bus stop. So they were ranked a little bit higher. They were assigned a higher weighted grade. And so that's just sort of a nuanced way to rank them. Again, I think the project team has identified that the priority is to bring all of these into ADA compliance. So we would look at the stations that are lacking that and then likely move forward with the ones that have the highest boardings first in terms of improving.
Okay.
So does that make sense, or do you all need like an example of what that could be? Just real quick.
It makes sense. I'm wondering which list is which. I'm assuming the canyons, the first one that talks about Park City Mountain, the Canyons Transit Hub, that may be higher priority.
Yes. Yeah, I would say so, because they're essentially less ADA compliant than that second list, which are they're close to being compliant. They function well as an ADA accessible stop, however, they're not technically. So yes, I would say that first list with the canyons and PC Mountain, that would likely be a higher priority to improve because the other ones sort of meet that better.
Okay, thanks.
Another question, Alexis, or anybody from the staff that can answer. So from the standpoint of, are any of these stops a private concern versus a public PC transit concern? Meaning, are there partnerships that would need to be formed, and would we want to enforce our standards on that part of it?
I can answer from the county perspective if you want me to go ahead, Alexis, just because we make a little bit of different requirements. So my understanding through the planning department and in the county, if the stops are built through a development agreement or some other agreement, the developers or private landowners, they either provide the money, labor, or actually build the stop. But once it's stopped, once it's built, it's technically turned over to the county for maintenance, and anything that would have to be, any improvements to be made would be the responsibility of the county. In the CVMA area, it doesn't. In the CVMA area, the appearance is that they're responsible for it, but actually they are just maintaining it because they can, and they have some economies of scale, but it's really the responsibility of the county to do so, is how I understand the ownership of the stops in the county.
And does that include recapitalizing it at some point?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
I guess I would just add to that, I think, and Kim probably can clarify for me, I think that's more her role, but we do have some stops on private property within city limits. However, as far as I understand, we have been maintaining those. For example, the Park Avenue shelter project that I'm working on now, we're essentially recrafting easements with those private property owners to have access to construct and maintain. But again, also with a developer agreement, we would require the developer to purchase and install.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Alexis? Okay. Hearing none, we'll go on
Just
to. Sorry.
Sorry, Kim, to interrupt. Just to add quickly, I think we would like to come back to JTAB and update you and plan to update you on our timeline. Our staff prioritize the list of improvements and some firmer costs associated with that. So you'll be hearing from us again.
Okay. Thank you. So our next discussion item is open federal grants and capital projects. So Andy, if you would scroll to the staff report that was included in the packet on page 57. And what we're hoping to do at this initial step with the staff report is get your blessing conceptually on a proposed process for federal grant applications and the prioritization for bus stop improvements. And also we were hoping to give you just a broad overview of capital grants that we have been awarded to date. So recently, we learned a good thing. We learned we could convert some funds from a canceled project to this bus stop improvement effort. As we've heard, it will cost millions to do. So any found funds are well welcomed. And staff is recommending that these funds be moved to that project that is a priority project. And they're roughly in the amount of $2 million. The funds were originally intended for Kimball Junction Transit Center Phase 2, which did not happen and it was essentially canceled. So we'd like to repurpose those funds and actually use them for the bus stop improvement project.
What would the Phase 2 have looked like?
I don't know that I can explain that in great detail.
I can jump in, Kim. It was a public plaza intended to be an activated space for things like farmers market or programming like that.
And why is it that we don't want to now do it?
Based on
I think. Oh,
Yep.
Go ahead.
Just based on the ownership of the parcel and potential plans, and the transit center actually functions pretty well right now, and I don't think we would get a return on our investment for activating that space as it was initially planned. I don't think there would be enough increased traffic to justify the expense.
What was the expense and what is the ownership issue? Do we not own it?
Well, we own it, but the grant is not to Summit County. The grant would have been to Park City, but the county owns the parcel.
It's the same parcel, just the southern portion of it or something?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think in addition, because there has been, since we built that project and anticipated putting those further improvements in, we have added what is probably more than a temporary parking lot now, as well as a sidewalk from the parking lot to the transit center. As well, the Kimball Junction area plan has been done, and we have a developer that is going through a process that could change what we think about doing it for that property. So it didn't make sense to apply the federal grant to a further project if we really don't know what we're going to do in the near future there. It's functioning well, and we wanted to leave some more flexibility open there.
How much was originally earmarked for that?
Approximately $2 million.
Okay, sorry for
the other concern too, Chris, is if you build something there with federal monies and then you end up changing it or tearing it down before it realizes its full life, you have to repay those monies. So you're making sure it's something that's going to be there for a long time.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we explained, this project's going to be ongoing. It's going to cost considerable money, but because of this bus stop improvement study that Alexis has already commissioned and had performed, this information we've received really helps make this project shovel ready, because we do need to act on it quickly. This is old money from like 2017. So if you don't spend it at some point, you will lose it. And so this project really kind of fits nicely with the situation at hand. And as you may know, Park City Transit is a subrecipient of FTA grants through UDOT. And in 2006, the county and the city entered into an interlocal agreement to provide transit services. This agreement stipulated that the city would administer the purchase of equipment and federal or state grants for transit services, and the funds are to be utilized for items in the grant application. UDOT has a state transit improvement plan, which is called a STIP. And per the interlocal agreement, the JTAB is supposed to recommend items to be included in the STIP annually. I would say in past years, it's my understanding that we have strayed from that process, and perhaps those things have not been brought to you for quite some time. And we need to basically get together, get back on track, and kind of reconcile where we're at and follow the process going forward. So that's the effort that we're trying to do right now. So with that, we have various grants that we've been awarded through fiscal year 23. And we would like to continue to come to the JTAB to recommend how we should prioritize these projects for the benefit of regional transit. So we want to just give you a brief overview of what those grants look like. And Andy, I don't know if you can scroll to attachment A. It's the spreadsheet with the yellow highlights.
Is the STIP mentioned here, you say it's the state transit, is that different than the state transportation? Is that a typo?
It's the same thing.
That I'm used to, it's not called state transit, it's state transportation.
It's the same thing, Chris. The transit projects are included along with the other transportation projects.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay, and Jerry, do you want to walk us through this spreadsheet of open grants?
Sure. Can you make it a little bit bigger, Andy?
It's a challenge at that scale.
Yeah, I mean, make it as big as you can. Yeah, that's good. So we wanted to review with you the current state of all of our federal formula and discretionary funds. And this is really just to kind of give you an overview of what's contained there. The only decision item, if I understand it, Kim, is to support the staff in moving forward with this bus stop improvement project. But the plan is that the staff will be bringing to JTAB more detailed projects as they mature. But go ahead.
I say that is correct. That is the plan. We'll have to keep coming back to the spreadsheet and making those decisions. So we're only asking about the initial bus stop improvement plan at this time.
Well, we wanted you to be familiar with the federal funds that are available and the type of projects and activities that can be funded with them. I will also just say one thing about the STIP. If you go into the official state transportation improvement plan and look for projects, what you'll find is a big lump sum for rural transit. You're not going to see the detail that we're going to go into here. So the JTAB will be reviewing and making decisions kind of at the project level, but that all gets rolled up by UDOT into one category in the official STIP. So this is arranged by year, and we receive two types of formula funds. The 5311 formula funds are for operations and capital construction, and there's quite a broad range of uses that can be made of that money as long as it is part of supporting a transit system. And the 5339 funds are construction and buses, bus replacement, bus facilities. The way this spreadsheet is organized, it follows the steps in the process. So if I can go through the steps in the process just generally, and then hopefully that will orient you to the rest of the information that's in here, and we can pull out a couple specific projects as examples. So as Kim mentioned, UDOT manages the funds for transit that flow to all of the areas outside of the urbanized zones. If a city and a transit agency is in an urbanized area, then it goes through the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Wasatch Front Regional Council, or Mountain Lands Association of Governments, or Bear River Association of Governments. In the rural area, they're all managed by UDOT. So UDOT applies for these formula funds. They typically are getting in the neighborhood of $6 million a year for these 5311 funds. And then they allocate those to the various transit operators that are outside the urbanized areas. So in the Uinta Basin and St. George, parts of Cache Valley Transit, Park City participate in those funds. Indian reservations receive funding through this program. Park City gets the biggest chunk of that. So of that $6 million a year for 5311 operating, Park City typically gets $2 million-ish a year. Park City also, to support UDOT in applying for these funds, Park City submits an application and lists the expected uses and projects that will be associated with those funds. And so that's what's in this column here called reason requested. Requesting a project in your application doesn't necessarily mean that's what you get. So if you want to scroll to the right a little bit, Andy, you see in federal fiscal year 17, we requested a whole bunch of things. I think if you add it all up, it's maybe $10 million. And what was awarded, so the amount awarded column, you see that there was about $2 million for, this is really for operations. And then there was another $2 million for capital construction. So this is the money that we were talking about earlier that originally was planned for Kimball Junction Phase 2.
The sum of those two, or just one of them? Just the capital construction?
Yeah, I think that there's a note in the wrong row here, because the 2,206,000, it's hard for me to, since I can't move this spreadsheet around myself. All right, so let me just go through row by row. So the amount awarded was $1,981,000 for operations, $92,000 for administration, and then can you scroll back to the left? Okay, so there's an amount that says total not committed to a specific project. So that 2,206,000 is the full amount awarded, if you're still with me.
Yep.
And then the number below it is the amount that's still left over, that's not already committed to another project.
Got it.
All
So,
right.
Of the 2,206,000, there was approximately 150,000 spent.
Yeah, it's not been spent yet, but it's been earmarked for that, the stops at Fresh Market and Park Avenue. So that's the basic structure of this spreadsheet. So the amounts that are highlighted in yellow are amounts that staff is going to be working on to bring back to you with recommendations for being allocated toward projects in the future. There's some other, if you'll scroll back to the right a little bit, Andy, there's some other comments in here that we actually had a meeting yesterday with UDOT and have more current information about how the CARES Act is going to influence these things. So we had been exploring converting some of these funds to emergency relief funds, and that's not going to happen. So that those comments in their ER conversion requested, we'll take those out in the next version of this because that's no longer an option available to us. UDOT had originally told us that the CARES Act was going to allow us to convert unspent formula funds to emergency relief and to not have to have a local match. Typically, those operating costs require a local match of 50%. But as I said, that's not going to be an option available to us.
Are there local matches required on the 5311 and the other, all of these?
Yes, typically the operating components, so those first two rows, have to be matched at 50% with local funds. And for the Park City Summit County system, it's not a problem. You know, you have a $15 million operation and you're getting $2 million of federal funds. So there's significant overmatch coming from local sales tax and local revenue. The capital projects are typically funded at 80% federal, 20% local match. So the project that was just being discussed for bus stop improvements would make use of this 2.056 that's still available from 2017. And then some capital grant funds that are available from future years. So that's the basic arrangement of this spreadsheet. And we could go through and answer questions that you have about specific projects, but hopefully this gives JTAB the complete picture of the kinds of capital and operating activities that can be supported with federal funding, and make sure that JTAB is able to align your priorities with where the money's going.
Could you scroll over to the left again, Andy, and let us look down the column?
Yeah, that planned projects is probably of interest to you. Those are the things that are currently active, important projects that staff will be recommending come forward to you. You've already seen the fleet replacement plan. So the plan to purchase 14 electric buses. And so all of those that have a note in them for CP0009, transit rolling stock replacement, those are all of the various federal sources that support that large procurement.
What's the one in fiscal 18, 5311, the 4,569,000 that is the Quinn's Park and Ride lot? What's going on with that?
So that's the project to design and construct a park and ride lot at Quinn's Junction. And the reason, if you looked at this this chart a month or so ago, you would have seen maybe 2.3 million for that project. The overall project cost, including access and utilities, is over $4 million. In the last couple of months, UDOT came to Park City and notified us that they had about $2 million of fiscal year 18 capital construction funds unspent and still available. And they asked us whether we had a project that was mature enough that it could make use of those. And so we said, absolutely, we'll take it and apply it to this park and ride project at Quinn's.
What's the total cost of the park and ride at Quinn's?
So 4.7, Alexa, maybe you can chime in on that.
Sure. So the estimate that we have right now, we're looking at approximately 3.2 to 3.6 for construction. However, I think that does not include inflation. That does not include project management or construction management, things like that. So the entire cost of the project, including all of the project management and admin side of it, is about 4.6 or just under there.
So are you saying that the feds are paying for this whole thing?
They'll be paying 80.
Correct, yeah. Excluding the local match requirement of 20% that we will provide.
Let's scroll down a little further and see what else you got in here.
Hey, Jerry.
Yes.
Something brought up earlier about the non-conversion of relief funds. I know in our previous budget conversations that was identified as a significant source of funding. I'd like to hear a little more about that. Are there implications for our budget now that we've been informed we will not be able to convert those funds into emergency relief?
Sure. I think the short answer is we are still able to access CARES Act funding over and above our expected formula funds that are already in the budget. And in our meeting yesterday, Tim Boschert, the UDOT public transit team manager, indicated to us that we should be able to access the roughly $6 million of CARES Act funding. Again, that's over and above what we would normally get from federal formula funds. And that we should be able to have access to that 6 million within the next couple of months. So we're still well above what the budget projection was. What we're disappointed about, and frankly a little frustrated with UDOT because they didn't understand what the federal rules were and kind of led us down a path that it was just the wrong path. But what we were hoping to was the remainder of our fiscal year 17 money, our fiscal year 18 money, and our fiscal year 19 money. So a total of about $4.5 million. We were hoping to have access to all of that also this year. And that's not going to happen. We're going to have to apply for that, quarterly and kind of get it as operations move along. So we're still well above our budget projections. It's just not as good as what UDOT had originally led us to believe.
So I understand there's frustration with UDOT in the process and feeling like you were misled. But what I also just heard you say, and I just want to be clear on this, is that 4.5 million of formula funds that you had been led to believe you could convert to relief funding is not completely off the table. There's just a different process to access it and is it still, would it be fair to say repurpose it, or maybe I'm mishearing you on that?
No, it's still available to us and we will still access it, but we'll do it in the normal process. So we'll do it over the next 2 years instead of getting it all at once.
Okay,
and
so
Jerry,
that was the difference. It was going to happen. The normal process is we would have access to that formula funding over a period of time. And because of COVID, there was, you had been led to believe that you would be able to repurpose it in a much shorter period of time and access it. But it's the same money. It's just a matter of the timeline and the ability to access it sooner.
That's right.
Okay, thanks.
So Jerry, just to further clarify that approximately $4.5 million, were we led to believe that it was going to be 100% available without having to match originally, and now we'll have to provide a 20%, it'll be essentially 80-20. Was that one of the factors as well?
Yes, we were told that that would be converted to emergency relief funding. We would not have to have any local match, and that was just wrong. So the normal program applies, and these are operating funds, so they require a 50% match.
And then the 50% match. Gotcha. And then above and beyond that, the $6 million of CARES Act money, is that for the entire rural system in the state, or is that available to Park City Transit?
So that's the amount that is earmarked for Park City Transit.
Oh, okay.
The state
And is
has
there
about 22 million for the rural program in total from CARES Act.
So that $6 million is going to be extremely helpful in keeping our system alive while the recession goes on. Is there a limit? Can we piece that over and use that over years, or do we have a set time that we need to expend it?
No, there's no expiration date, and I think the hope by both Congress and UDOT is that we're prudent with that and make it last. If this current economic recession lasts a prolonged period of time.
So I'm assuming then that staff will come back at some point with some kind of schedule of how they would like to apply that, so that JTAB has an idea of that to look at in the future.
Right. Yes.
Gotcha.
Are there any other questions on this spreadsheet?
Can I just
to the bottom, please?
And while you're scrolling down, let me just offer any of the JTAB members or people here, if after this meeting you are able to spend a little more time with it and have a question about it, if it's acceptable to everyone, I would just say fire those questions off to me, and maybe copy Kim and Caroline, or the whole JTAB. But we'd be happy to provide any more details after the meeting if something comes up you ask a question about.
On the Quinn's Junction Park and Ride, what's its status as far as being designed, engineered, construction drawings, breaking ground, completion? What's that timeline look like?
We are approaching 60% design, so that's one of the reasons I can't give you a very specific cost estimate for construction. We're still ironing out some of those nuances and end-of-line facilities and things like that. So I anticipate we just sort of picked this project back up and are running with it again, so we need to have some coordination meetings to make sure that we're all on the same page. But I can provide a much clearer, specific, updated timeline once I have some of those meetings, but I would anticipate the earliest that we would potentially go to construction would be next year, and possibly the year after at the latest.
I'd like to have further discussion about that at some point.
Absolutely.
Chris, just curiosity, are you looking to, what answer would you prefer, sooner or later?
Steve, I think in my mind, and again, I can't claim ignorance due to newness for very long, although Bob Jasper did it for 5 years. But I would say I think the Quinn's interchange is, in need of refurbishment, and the location of the Pace Frontage Road as it comes into Quinn's is problematic due to its closeness to the northbound on-ramp. And I'm a little concerned that that project isn't necessarily a no regrets project. And I'm hearkening back to the statement made earlier on phase 2 at Kimball of not wanting to build a project that then has to be changed because we have to repay the federal funds. And so I would just say, personally, I have some questions in my mind about that project.
Absolutely. Would it be helpful if I came back to this group and gave a presentation on the status and some of the things we're working on, including a traffic impact study to determine how that interchange would function, and our work with UDOT on ensuring that any of the widening that they may do in the future doesn't impact this federal asset. So I'm happy to come back and talk through that.
I think that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Okay. Again, if you have any questions later on, please just send them to us and we'll try to provide them answers to them. This is something that I hope that over the next several months, JTAB gets pretty familiar with and pretty comfortable with how this process works.
Jerry, can I ask one last high level question with this? It surprises me to see fiscal year 17, $2 million sitting there in a bucket waiting to be spent. I'm always kind of one of these big fans of, if the federal government gives me money, I'm going to go spend it on things as long as there's reasonable stuff. Is it usual to see things delayed this long between getting a grant and actually putting it to work? I mean, I can understand if there was a project particularly that was delayed or something, but this just feels odd that we've got years of backlog of money sitting there.
Yeah, it's really a UDOT process, symptom of their process, if you will. So in addition to the federal rules, so, you know, when I was at UTA, we didn't have an intermediary. So the transit agency was dealing directly with the feds, and we were able to spend money in the same year if we were ready to do it. UDOT has, because of state requirements, state fiscal requirements, UDOT wants to have a much more mature sense of what the projects and operating expenses are going to be before it releases them. And so it historically has operated a couple years behind with the rural program. And it's one of the things we talked to them about yesterday, because it would be a boon to the rural systems if we could jump ahead 1 year. You'd basically be getting like a $2 million bonus to get 1 year more current. And that's one of the things we asked them to explore, not to be in the current year, but just to be working on 2018 money in 2020 instead of working on 2017 money. So they said they would look at that. And I think, you know, when they talked to us about all of their state requirements, it seemed to me that we should be able to get at least 1 more year current compared to where we are now.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, it's a really good question, and you know, obviously we're dealing with some bureaucratic inertia there that we'd like to break, and we will be working together to continue to try and break that. But the thing that I wanted to say at the end of this part of this is that I really appreciate how the two staffs are working together on this now. And I, you know, not to continue to hearken back to the past, but this whole process of formula capital grants to most people, including JTAB and the county, has been kind of a black box within the transit system for quite a long time. And having Jerry and Kim, Alexis and Sarah and Matt bring this forward out into the open for the public to see, for the county to see, and really for the county to participate in fully, has been extremely eye-opening. And as well, it helps us all plan the future system a lot better. And so the work that's gone into this over the last 2 months has been tremendous. I know Jerry has spent a lot of time doing the forensic work to bring this forward, and so has Kim. And I really appreciate it, as well as relating these conversations with UDOT, because those things are, you know, just as you identified, Steve, it seems illogical and is illogical, but it is the way they do it. So being able to talk about that here is just helpful in the overall. And so I just want to compliment everybody for bringing this forward. This is exactly the type of stuff that JTAB should be working on.
I just have a question, if you could clarify this, Jerry. So when you're applying for these funds, it's Park City applying on behalf of the entire system, which includes data from both entities, correct?
Yes.
So none of them are done just individually to Park City proper?
That's correct. I guess I would say, you know, as Tom just said, this was much more of a black box exercise. And so I think it probably has appeared that Park City was, you know, maybe looking to do its projects first, you know, higher priority than the regional priorities. And so we just wanted to open the whole thing and make sure that JTAB sees all of what's being applied for and where it's going. So I don't think that the county really had visibility to what was being applied for, but the concept and what the interlocal agreement says is that the parties treat this as a regional system, but Park City has the responsibility to manage this federal grant process.
Okay, thank you.
I guess one last thing I would say, I've been really focused on the formula program. In addition to the, so when I say formula, it's an amount that is set aside each year and it flows to the states for rural transit. And it's a portion of the Transit Act funding. In addition to the formula funds, there are discretionary grants that come available from time to time. And Park City and Summit County have been very aggressive about applying for and have been very successful in receiving those discretionary grants. So at the bottom of this chart, you see 3 rows. They're in the section of the code 5339, but they're 5339B, which is for bus and bus facilities, and 5339C, which is low, no emission bus and bus facilities. And in the last year or so, we've received 3 of those discretionary grants, 1 to add overhead chargers, 1 to upgrade the bus vehicle locating, dispatching, real-time technology. And then the last one is to add some maintenance lifts and enhance the operator break rooms and add a mother's room.
Just a quick correction on that, Jerry. We haven't heard back on the break room.
Okay, that's right. The other 2.
Or I'm sorry. Yeah, the other 2 are correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So as we obviously said, you know, a big priority is the bus stop improvement project. And I would ask that Caroline walk us through kind of the staff's logic that we're looking at right now as we work to prioritize which steps we take first.
Sure, thanks, Kim. So I think Alexis and Kim, they both talked about this, but as we're looking to prioritize the capital funding, we're gonna first use the accessibility study as our baseline to create a list of those capital improvements based on, number 1, their accessibility score, but also what projects can be implemented in the most cost and time efficient manner. And we're going to use a screening criteria that includes, as I said, the accessibility score, but also feasibility of the project ease and speed of implementation, whether there's required permitting or environmental clearance, land ownership, existing transit ridership, and costs. The other thing that I think is important to note is that there are some projects that we will need to do to support these accessibility improvements. For example, implementing rider information or purchasing heavy equipment that will allow us to maintain the accessibility improvements, especially in the winter. And while those are not called out specifically in the bus stop accessibility project, pursuing those purchases are important to maintaining the whole system. So those will also be looked at in the context of the entire system and how do we make it the most accessible we can for the money we have. And that's going to be a staff exercise. And as Kim said, I think, or maybe Alexis, we already have ongoing meetings scheduled as staff to work on that prioritization list. And then during our next JTAB meeting, staff will come back to the JTAB members and present you with a draft prioritization list, as well as a brief memo describing our methodology for identifying and prioritizing all of those improvements. So what we're looking for today is just a thumbs up on our initial methodology from the JTAB members, i.e. you guys are on the right track, come back to us next month with a list.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm happy with that. The one thing I would ask, when you were just describing the like heavy equipment, I mean, are you talking about things like snow removal equipment and stuff, or?
Yes.
And so would that actually, that would come out of the 2 million, or is that separate?
So potentially it could come out of this these capital funds, but I also know that Kim had briefly mentioned to me that they have some other flexibility in terms of support vehicles for a different funding source. So that will all be part of our staff process. And when we come back to you next month, we will also identify exactly what pot of money the funding would be coming from. And especially on the county side, that is really important for keeping our bus stops accessible, because we are very limited in staff and equipment at this point. And as Kim can talk about, I mean, I'll just give an example. Last winter, we had a wheelchair customer in Pine Brook quite literally waiting in the road for the pink line. And I had to go out there with a shovel. I couldn't do anything. We had our inmate crew out there. The snow was so heavy that they couldn't clear it. And we had to wait until Public Works could come with heavy equipment to clear an entire sidewalk to get that wheelchair passenger into a safe place where he could board the bus safely. That's just an example of the type of equipment that we need to maintain the accessibility of our system.
So are you looking for us to buy you a new shovel? I didn't understand.
It's a,
No, just
actually,
kidding.
it's a snow push box. It's a push box for a snow cat machine. So yes.
We'll use it in the off season for skiing.
Excellent. Well, this is good to me. I like the idea of coming back with a list. I mean, it sounds like we've got a huge potential for things that could be done with these bus stops. I mean, a whole lot of them are just basically a sign next to a road. So I think it'd be interesting to see what we can do with $2 million.
I agree. This is a huge priority. It's kind of foundational to the operation of the system for residents and visitors. So I really like the idea of getting some of these underway as quickly as possible.
Okay. And then on the remainder of that staff report, Andy, if you want to go to page 58, there's a proposed timeline for how we can ensure we're going to keep this process intact going forward and work together on future grant requests and what projects we want to work on. And in the interest of time, I was not going to go through that unless anyone had any questions. Okay. Thank you. All right, then next, looks like we got the COVID-19 update. Andy, if you could pull up that PowerPoint, and I will go quickly through this. Okay, so if you go to the first slide there, basically just as Kim requested last time, we want to make sure we have a COVID update in each JTAB. And a lot of this presentation is something that we're actually going to be sharing with the state legislature subcommittee on COVID and transportation. So we're just telling them what we're doing to protect the public.
Do the operators routinely, or as a matter of course, check their temperature?
Yes, we do have a thermometer available for them to check their temperature.
I know there's a gym available for me to go. It doesn't mean I go.
Right, right. We're not mandating it, but we do ask them at the start of their shift if they have any symptoms that they believe are related to COVID-19. So in the beginning, we did have a few cases, about 4 or 5 cases with operators, but knock on wood, we've been having a good track record ever since. So I'm hoping that, you know, some of that is thanks to these measures. Okay, if you want to go to the next slide, Andy. So employees that have symptoms are encouraged to stay home, seek medical guidance. We've got signage posted in our public works buildings, you know, asking employees not to enter if they are experiencing COVID symptoms. And for the most part, I think our employees, from what Vinny and I have seen, have been very cautious with this and very thoughtful to make sure if there's any doubt, we do not risk anyone in the public. Go to the next slide, please.
Kim, one thing that we had done, I know early, was for the part-time people who don't have sick leave, we were, you know, basically providing COVID leave. So if you were sick and part-time, you still got time off paid to avoid encouraging people to come work anyway, even though they're sick. Are we still doing that?
Yes, it's been changed a little bit because the federal government has stepped in and kind of extended family medical leave protections. And so that has, I would say, more of a process behind it now. In the beginning, we weren't necessarily acquiring medical documentation, but now we are. So we've kind of tightened up that process with the change in the federal laws regarding it.
Okay, thank you.
So obviously we've got signage posted in all of our shelters, our transit centers, our buses. It's on our website and our social media. We've done everything we can to communicate, you know, how people can stay safe and help stop the spread. Go to the next slide, please. All of our operators received a 32-page COVID packet, giving them information on how we've changed our protocols to combat the spread and making sure that they understand that and understand that they need to apply these protocols because it is a lot that was added quickly for everyone's protection. We wanted to make sure there was no confusion. Go to the next slide. So some of the updated protocols include face mask usage for the operators, shift change procedures, which I'll show you a little bit later, sanitizing schedules for the buses and the transit centers, public passenger interactions. You know, we still are doing the ridership limitations. If someone is symptomatic, we are asking that they contact us for an on-demand ride, and we will send a large vehicle and put them in the back and take them to the doctor or the hospital where they're going. And also wheelchair securements, we've changed our process on how we handle that just to ensure additional safety. And lost and found. There was early on some transit agencies that experienced some spread of COVID from people handling lost and found items. You can go to the next slide. So all of our employees that are interacting with the public or are in the building and not able to maintain social distance are asked to wear a face mask while on duty. And we have provided face masks to them. Next slide. In fact, the FTA recently shipped us some face masks. We didn't know they were going to. It was kind of a surprise. They've shipped them out to 2,200 agencies across the United States. And Those came just a few weeks ago, and I understand they're shipping more. So we are sitting good with face masks right now. You would like to go to the next slide, please, Andy? The shift change procedure, here we demonstrate how you should have some social distance between yourself to reduce transmission as one operator is relieving the bus and another operator is picking up the bus. And next slide. There's also the sanitizing schedules. We've got a checklist for people doing that. There's an operator in the AM and PM that each day will perform routine sanitizing of all the transit buildings and sheltered stops. And that's just in addition to what's already going on in the vehicles. So we continue to maintain that high amount of sanitizing to ensure we're not spreading COVID any further. Next slide. So we've got the products for them to be able to do that. They're instructed to sanitize the driver and passenger areas of their bus, the beginning, during their shift. We also have products, wipes available to customers if they would like to sanitize the area that they're going to sit in. And these sanitizing equipment and supplies are on all buses. Next slide, please. There's been a company that's been contracted to help us in addition to what the operators are doing with the city buildings and the transit centers. And they've also been coming in and performing monthly deep cleaning. So I think our buildings are cleaner than they've ever been right now. Next slide. Yeah, we've talked about this before, kind of the sneeze guard. We've got those installed to protect the operator, limit the interactions between operators and passengers that are within the 6 feet. And our fleet maintenance team was great to get those up and going, and really appreciate their initiative there. And passengers are continuing to board and exit through the rear door unless they need the bus to kneel for ADA assistance.
So is that plexiglass, is it separating the front door from the rest? And if so, if someone with ADA, does that hinge or something and they can let someone through?
Yeah, they can swing that and let them in. So it's kind of I guess our own design. It's a little different than the ones that are on the market, but I think it's better personally. So yeah, they have no problem boarding wheelchairs with this design. Okay, next slide. Obviously, we've talked about the ridership limits. You can only get so many people on a bus when you're trying to keep 6 feet distance. So far, we've been able to handle that with our current ridership. There have been a few trips that have been ticking up on the amount of boardings, and we've had to add some buses in to ensure that distance. So it's something that the supervisors and the operators monitor closely daily, and we'll certainly make you aware if that tipping point is seen in the near future, but we're able to adequately handle it at this time. Next slide. Okay, in the event that an operator cannot board a passenger because the capacity is already full on the bus, they will inform that person, and then they will call into dispatch, and we can actually send someone out to make sure they get to where they're going. My understanding is we really haven't had to do that yet, but that is an option because we still want to make sure we're not leaving anyone stranded, but we're being safe. Next slide. So with the symptomatic passengers, we do have a specific vehicle that we will dispatch to keep the distance. And we will sanitize that vehicle after we transport that person. And we will actually trade out the vehicle, and we won't send it out again until it is sanitized. So we feel the need to still help people, obviously, that are sick, but we're trying to be very cautious and not get any one of our folks sick as well. Next slide. The wheelchair securements, basically they can board through the front door, but the change there has been not only that the operator is wearing a face mask, but the passenger is instructed and the operator is instructed that they should not be communicating until they're 6 feet apart. So we don't want casual conversations happening while the operator is close and securing the wheelchair. Next slide. Lost and found process. Operators need to wear gloves, place a lost and found item in a plastic bag. Bags are then brought to our dispatcher where we catalog them and store them until they're claimed. And then when someone comes to retrieve their item, we actually ask them to meet us outside, and we place their item on our picnic table. they give us a call. We go out and place the item on the picnic table, and then they can pick it up so that it's a non-contact delivery, kind of similar to how I get my pizzas these days. Okay, next slide. Some of the updated protocols, you know, we recognize that we're in an ever-changing fluid environment. It is a day-by-day thing, and we've made our operators aware of that these protocols could change, you know, as new guidance comes out or things change with volume of customers, et cetera. We are going to have to update those. So they're well aware that even though this is a protocol today, it could change tomorrow, and we will let you know and make sure you're informed. Next slide. Okay, Jerry already touched on this. Just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of the changes in the CARES funding, that we cannot do the emergency relief funds as we thought. He explained that we'll still get that money. It'll just take a little longer. But we do have the $6 million coming that has been approved by the FTA. So it's just a matter of administration at this point, and we are estimating that'll take a couple months. And that is
100% match. You mean that there's 0% match, or that?
Yes. Yeah, we don't have to come up with a match. It's for all operating expenses.
I would change that to 0 match then.
Yes, correct. Sorry. Okay, next slide. So as you recall, you know, in earlier JTABs, we talked about that we wanted to maintain our head count, even though we've got this drastically reduced service. And we are still doing that. We have seen a tiny bit of attrition, just a couple positions. We're not looking to fill those at this time. But that's, you know, ongoing. It will save us in the long run with training. And this is some of the reason why we're not seeing an initial drastic drop in our costs, because we still have the head count. Okay.
So Kim, just to comment on that, I mean, I think I know that we've been expressing that we might need to make some changes to some of the county service based on revenue projections on some of the sales taxes, and I know we're having ongoing conversations about that, and we'll be progressively bringing some of those topics back to JTAB. You know, I think that value with some of the realities of funding might run into each other at this point, and I'm sure that's already happened to some extent, but we're going to have to talk about that more.
Correct. Okay, next slide, Andy. And as you recall, this was the budget revenue projections that we shared a couple of times now at JTAB. And the following slide has the general overview of what we were trying to cut from the budget to make up for the 5.4 million shortfall. If you could go to the next slide, Andy. Sorry, that's really tiny, but you've seen it before in the last JTAB packet. So as Jerry said, you know, even though we've had some changes with what UDOT's been telling us, we were conservative in our estimates of only expecting 1.5 million in CARES funding. So I think that was a good, wise call, and that was definitely with Matt's encouragement. And so it hasn't derailed us from the original plan on our budget assumptions. Okay, and then same thing, this was presented last time as the provisional budget. We're still on this plan at this point. Hey, is there any questions about COVID updates?
So the net effect is that you told us the 1.5 million was conservative. When you weren't able to make the conversions or whatever, we didn't get as much funding. We will still get 1.5 million such that the 5.4 million on the previous slide still holds true.
Correct. I mean, in actuality, we should get much more, but we're still just anticipating 1.5 million.
Yeah, our hope is to have 6 million available, and then we would apply 1.5 of that to this fiscal year operating budget.
How does the availability of, let's say the CARES does come through as you're projecting, you know, we get a total of 6 million allocated to us. We've budgeted for 1.5. To kind of tie this back to what Tom just brought up with the decrease in sales tax, which we're all experiencing. It's not just, you know, it's everywhere through Summit County. So sales tax, room tax is something that funds transit. So how do we, you must be thinking about how we use that additional 4.5 to help address some of these issues like the shortfall in sales tax that we're projecting and assuming is going to happen. And how does that play into maintaining service, keeping that head count, those sort of issues that Tom said we should be revisiting. And yes, we need to revisit them, but we're going to have an ability to look at funding above and beyond what we've budgeted for, which could allow for service above and beyond what maybe is required. But when does all this kind of, come to a head where we have a little more information about what is an essential level of service and available funding from traditional sources that ties into the non-traditional CARES funding?
So there's a lot in that question, Tim. So the reason that Park City is approaching their FY21 budget as a really kind of a provisional budget with the opportunity to come back in 3 months with a more solid budget is just because so many of the issues are yet unknown. So for example, we don't know, Park City or Summit County, what the sales tax revenue is going to look like 12 months from now. And we don't know what the demand for transit service is going to be this next winter. So we're trying to take this a step at a time. What you will see in JTAB is Park City is going to adopt this provisional budget this month. You will also see in the next month or so some recommendations from the staff of the city and the county with regard to what level of service will be provided this winter. And we've got to take our best guess at what the demand will be and match that demand but achieve the operating savings that we've outlined in the budget. So you'll be seeing a winter service plan that's pretty significantly scaled back from what last winter's service was. And our hope is that we're able to meet the demand and meet the operating budget. There is a chance that, well, and if we do, then we will only need to consume $1.5 million of that CARES Act funding, and there will be another $4.5 million available for future years. If the next fiscal year is in the same boat and you're operating that same level of service, then you'll need to consume another chunk of that CARES Act funding. But I think this is a reasonable approach with the information that we have. And, I believe everyone hopes that the economy will rebound more quickly. And if that's the case, then that CARES Act funding can last longer and you may be able to do more with the transit system than we're currently thinking about. So
yeah, I like that, Jerry, and thanks for laying that out. That helps me understand that CARES Act is sort of like a emergency relief reserve fund that we can tap into. We know it's available and we can kind of cover whatever adjustments we weren't really hitting on our assumptions. I think, what I hear Tom asking and I'm concerned about too is just sort of more immediate. And I know you have to plan for the winter and we have to make our best, case assumptions for the winter, but we're also in the midst of, we're halfway through June. We've got people in town. We saw a pretty good pedestrian experience yesterday or Sunday on Main Street that was pretty interesting. And I think anytime you go to Main Street now, you start to see a lot more people out and about. I'm getting indications that folks are looking to come to Park City. Maybe it's not the traditional destination visitor that we're used to. It might be more of a longer stay Airbnb family excursion for the month of July or August. But anyway, I'm seeing signs of life and vibrancy that maybe are above and beyond our baseline assumptions for sales tax revenue, which is good. And at the same time, I know that we're a 2-month delay in getting actual confirmation on sales tax numbers. And at the same time, we're running a transit system that is real time. So it's kind of how are we, and I know this is a question that we really can't answer, but there's got to be a mechanism to make those real-time adjustments. And if we're carrying extra employees, and if we're carrying extra routes that are not deemed essential, that's something that I'm concerned about. And yes, and yet I'm optimistic about. I think this exercise that we're going through currently gives us the ability to really drill down and say, who are we serving? Are these transit dependent people? Is that a baseline of service that creates our baseline of essential transit service? And how do we look at the future and this summer, not just this winter, but this summer, in the appropriate adjustments as we continue to move through the summer? And I get it, that's all dependent upon COVID cases and potential spikes and a potential second wave and, potentially going backwards instead of forward and all that kind of stuff. But so those are things that you can't really answer, but I'm assuming that is something that you and the Summit County staff and Park City staff are monitoring and working on and attempting to adjust real time to the best of your ability.
Absolutely, and I don't know if Kim, you or Caroline want to add to that, but I know that Kim and her staff are watching the ridership route by route each day and each week. And as she mentioned, the operators are on notice whenever they're experiencing ridership levels above what the social distancing allows. They're to report that, and she's in a position where we can respond to that with additional service pretty quickly.
Correct, and we still haven't reached our tipping point of where we can't handle it, that we don't have the resources to respond to it. So we're basically trying to offer the essential service, supplement it as needed to ensure social distancing, but not go beyond that to ensure that we have cost savings all along. And we do have some play in that because we've retained these extra operators. But at some point, you will reach that tipping point, and we're going to have to, look at some pretty hard decisions.
Kim, with regard to that tipping point, I find it really interesting that we've got the physical distancing as kind of seems like the primary trigger. I mean, we've got our operators wearing masks, which is a great thing. And then we've got physical distancing inside the buses, which only allows for a very small number of riders to ride each giant bus. And I get that, but has there been thought or consideration given to having masks available and telling people as they enter, having some sort of signage that if you're going to ride Park City Transit or Summit County Transit, you must be wearing a mask, which would then, I think, allow us to, reduce the amount of physical distancing and allow theoretically more people on a bus. I know that's what's happening in venues. You can now have 6,000 people in an outdoor venue and 3,000 people in an indoor venue, as long as they're all wearing masks in the indoor venue, which makes me think, is there the possibility of doing that in the buses, or is that something that we've ruled out for some reason?
There definitely is the possibility of doing that in the buses, and that was being explored and continues kind of to be explored in the background. The concern there is, and I've been on calls weekly with other transit agencies across the United States and Canada, and in those agencies where they are asking their passengers to wear masks, they're really not able to enforce it because it puts the operator in a dangerous position. There's been violence that has broken out over that on a bus. It also comes into play with ADA accommodations. If a passenger tells an operator they cannot wear a mask because they have a disability that prohibits it, the operator really can't question that. So it's never going to be 100%. You're always going to have people that won't wear a mask, and we really cannot regulate it sufficiently. But it is something that we would explore if we cannot handle the capacity that we're experiencing. So far, we've been able to handle it and still ensure the 6-foot distance. And part of the assumption was we were thinking we were going to be going to green in the near future, but I know as the cases skyrocket, that probably needs to be reassessed.
Well, and I would further, just on that comment alone, I certainly support everything that you're talking about in regards to You know, having our, you know, the responsibility of our drivers to be enforcement on some of this stuff. The decisions that we're going to have to make and our system is going to have to make if we move to green is how do we want to operate as opposed to what the guidelines tell us, because the guidelines might, from our judgment, may not be the right thing. They're a guideline, but we can go above the guidelines if we choose that that's the right way to go. And I don't know what the right answer is there, but I know we'll be having those discussions.
Correct. And some of the philosophical conversations that are happening with some of the other agencies are, you know, at what point are the passengers responsible for themselves? And, you know, we just focus on protecting our operator. And, you know, I think we're trying to protect everybody right now, but, you know, that is kind of how they're looking at it because it's become such a challenge for them in some of the larger cities.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But the other thing, you know, and this is getting into some of the county conversations in public health, or what we're hearing from some of our businesses in the community too, is what's our responsibility in local government and in business to project what right is, and even if the guidelines say something different, if we believe as a community that face masks are what's going to help us, how do we project that to the public? And that's some of the campaigns that you're seeing now around stay safe, stay open, or you know, superheroes wear masks or have masks, you know, that type of stuff. We're trying to project from a public health standpoint that this is the right thing to do, even if some of our guidelines don't tell us that.
Yeah, great point.
Kim, can I just add something really quickly? For the circulator service and any potential changes to service that would occur on a smaller van, I think we're in a little bit of a different position because we really can't safely operate without people wearing masks. So we've talked to our contractor about people are going to be required to wear masks if they're riding the circulator. There's just no safe way to carry passengers without masks. And our contractor they've talked to their operators and they are willing to sort of be that enforcement mechanism. But they're also, to echo Kim's concern, they are a little bit concerned about the conflicts that it may cause. But we're hoping that people will be willing to do it when the operator says, please wear a mask.
Okay. Are there any other questions about COVID that I can answer anyways? All right, our next item, we wanted to look at changing the July JTAB meeting date. It was originally scheduled for the 21st, but some of our folks have a conflict with that. Would it be acceptable to the JTAB board to meet on the 28th instead? It's just a week later.
I have a conflict on the 28th.
Okay.
But, you know, we should probably go with the most that we can get there.
Well, we were wanting to have the ILA discussion, so I would like to have everybody there. I don't know that it has to be on a Tuesday. You know, we could move it to a different day of the week. It just seemed like Tuesday works well for most. We could go the other direction, I guess, and go a week earlier.
Are people out that entire week?
The week of the 21st?
Yeah.
Just the 21st itself.
Well, it's also Pioneer Day week.
Pioneer Day is not till Friday though, but
we've canceled our council meeting that week, Kim, as you'll remember.
We did on the 22nd.
Correct.
I wonder if it wouldn't be better to meet in July, more in the middle of July, move it up instead of back.
So the 14th, for instance?
The
be a problem
14th
for
to
you guys.
the following Thursday. Whatever, well, those are council days for you all.
I think one of the complications was that we were trying to make sure that Jerry could be there, and I think he was out for a period of time too.
Yeah, it's just the 14th and the 21st that I have commitments, just those 2 Tuesdays. I can make any other day work in the month.
What about Monday the 20th?
What about Monday the 13th? Or
good for me, either of those Mondays.
Or the 20th.
If
I could
we
do
went
either Monday.
If we were able to do it at 9:30 instead of 9, I could do it on Monday the 13th.
So people are out the 20th?
I'm
20th
here.
is good for me.
20th is good for me.
Yes.
I can do either the 13th or the 20th.
Okay, so July 20th at 9, sounds like it works.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Didn't you say 9:30?
That was
9 on the 20th works for me.
Okay. Let's send out 2 or 3 different ways to video conference in, and one of them will work.
Oh, we'll do that. Okay, and then I apologize, I didn't have it on the discussion items. We did send out the ridership numbers, and maybe Andy, you could just bring that up really quick so we get it in the record of the recording. Obviously, ridership is at an all-time low. We're still kind of hanging in there around 900 to 1,000 a day, as you'll see in the chart here. Well, quite a difference from our experience last year. Okay, with that, looks like on our upcoming agenda items, as I said, we wanted to discuss the ILA amendment in July, as well as route efficiencies, our analysis and assessment of those. And in August, we've got consideration of the revised budget. Hopefully we'll have a lot of good information by then, and service levels for the winter season that we'll be exploring. And are there any other agenda items anyone wants to add to that at this time?
Kim, really quick, do we want to discuss with the JTAB members what you and I talked about the PC SLC Connect and our increased bills, and how we want to talk to UTA about that, and whether we need to pursue something?
Yes, because of the lack of ridership, we're seeing quite a significant increase in what we're paying to fund the Connect. And just this past month alone, was our bill, and I'm sure your bill is the same, $57,000, when it's typically in the 30,000 range. So we don't know how flexible UTA can be. I think we have to act quickly because of how they bid their work, and kind of are obligated to that financial commitment to their operators through that bid. But I think it's worth exploring because it is becoming a significant amount of money.
So Jamie just messaged me and said we need to talk to UTA by the end of this week.
Okay.
And that, I think that's for August, because it's already bid through August.
Right. So just
You
to
mean
give,
for September?
they have an August change.
Oh.
So just to give you a flavor of this, back in March of 2019, our bill was around 28,000. This year it was 31,000, so a little increase. In April, it went from 32,000 to 34, so not too bad. But then May, we start to see it really jump up. Last year in May, we paid around 27,000, and it was 40,000. And now, going forward, we just got one for 57,000.
So what's the math that has that effect? I don't understand what the contract does, so that with fewer riders, we're paying more.
They use the fares to offset the cost. And if the fares aren't there, they pass it on to us.
Okay. So what are our options? If UTA goes, no, that's the deal, do we look at dropping that service? I mean, what are the alternatives other than pay it or get them to pay more?
I think we would have to explore the contract that we're in with them, but at this time, I'm not aware of any option. I think we would just try to work it out together. I obviously would be concerned they're running empty buses up and down the canyon, and maybe they have a shared interest in not doing that.
I think it's definitely worth having the conversation with them. I know you're doing a presentation for the legislature. This also may be something that you could bring up as far as effects of COVID-19 and budget realities and concerns. I don't know if that would be appropriate, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tom.
So I think to follow that line of logic, I mean, we have to strategically look at this as opposed to, I mean, we both have to strategically look at it and very tactically look at it. Certainly we're bleeding some cash on that now, but in the long run, this regional connection service is extremely important to the state and ourselves. So, I mean, I understand we need to make some decisions fairly quickly, but, this is a perfect example of what CARES Act funding probably should be helping us continue.
Correct. And I will say
it's going to be necessary when we, especially when our winter hits.
Yeah. I will say to date, I think UTA has been a great partner, so I don't anticipate that they wouldn't try to work with us on this as much as they could.
Mm-hmm. And my thought on the COVID presentation was not to have an ask or to blame UTA in any way, but just to talk about realities.
Right. I would like to see if they're participating, because I'm sure if they are, they will bring it up. I mean, they're losing fares across the board, and it's having a huge impact, I'm sure, on them. Okay. So I guess, Caroline, maybe me and you can work together on getting a meeting scheduled soon to discuss that with UTA.
Yeah, and I think Jamie and Scott were already trying to coordinate schedules. I just wanted to daylight it to the board.
Yes,
So
thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any more business for this JTAB? All right, well, hearing none, then I declare the meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody, and we'll meet again on July 20th.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you.
Kim.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.